The night of the gala was supposed to be one of celebration for me. I had been with my company for years, working my way up from the bottom, and this annual event was where achievements were recognized. My wife looked stunning in her dress, and I felt proud to have her on my arm. But the moment we entered the hall, I noticed the way her eyes lit up when she saw him, Ethan, the new alpha in her circle of friends. Tall, loud, and arrogant, he had a way of making everything about himself. It didn't take long before Ethan made his move to be the center of attention. He cracked jokes that were just a little too sharp, and his laughter echoed across the room. People laughed along, but I could tell it was forced. Then, while everyone stood near the buffet, he threw his arm around my wife as though they had known each other forever. My blood boiled, but I stayed quiet, watching. The breaking point came when he loudly announced, "Man, I don't know how she ended up with you," pointing at me with a smirk. The crowd erupted in nervous chuckles. My wife's face went pale, but she didn't say a word. I felt the heat of humiliation rush over me, and in that moment I understood, this wasn't just about me. This man thrived on belittling others to make himself feel powerful. I forced a polite smile, shook his hand, and walked away. Rage simmered inside me, but I wasn't about to create a scene at the gala. Instead, I excused myself to a quiet corner, pretending to take a phone call. But in reality, I was piecing together everything I knew about Ethan. He wasn't just some random guest. He worked in our company, new hire in the sales department. And HR had already circulated memos about fostering a respectful workplace culture. Over the next week, I began documenting every incident I could. I overheard him in the break room making crude comments about female co-workers, mocking others' appearances, and boasting about how he could take anyone's place in the company. People laughed nervously, but the discomfort was real. I started gathering witnesses, quiet conversations with colleagues who admitted they felt uncomfortable but feared speaking up. I compiled everything: dates, quotes, and even screenshots of inappropriate group messages he'd sent after hours. At first, I questioned whether I was being petty, but the more I uncovered, the clearer it became. Ethan wasn't just a jerk, he was a workplace bully. When I finally walked into HR with my neatly organized file, the director raised her eyebrows. "This is serious," she said, flipping through the pages. I didn't need to embellish anything. The evidence spoke for itself. By the end of that meeting, they promised an internal investigation. The fallout was swift. Within 2 weeks, Ethan's booming voice was gone from the office. HR cited behavioral misconduct in their official email, though the details were kept confidential. Around the office, whispers spread, and people finally felt relieved. The tension that had followed him like a shadow lifted almost overnight. When I told my wife about what I'd done, she stared at me for a long moment. "You didn't overdo it?" she asked cautiously. I shook my head. No. He dug his own grave. I just handed HR the shovel. She didn't argue. In fact, I think she respected me more for handling it without lowering myself to his level. At the next gala, things were different. There was no booming laugh overshadowing everyone, no arrogant presence making others feel small. This time, when my wife walked into the room with me, she squeezed my hand tightly. There was pride in her eyes, not for Ethan's bravado, but for the quiet strength I had shown. I realized then that true strength doesn't come from humiliating others in public. It comes from standing tall when someone tries to tear you down and knowing how to fight smart instead of loud. Ethan thought he was untouchable, the alpha of the room. But in the end, all it took was patience, strategy, and the truth to bring him down. That night, as we left the gala, I felt lighter. Not because Ethan was gone, but because I knew I had defended myself with dignity. My wife looked at me differently, and I realized I had earned something more valuable than applause. I had earned respect. And the best part? HR had taken him down, not me. I just gave them the push they needed. Ethan had embarrassed me once, but in the end, he embarrassed himself far worse.